In the land of Israel, it is divided among 12 tribes. 2 of those 12 tribes are actually one. Manasseh and Ephraim are the children of Joseph. But we speak of them as 2 separate tribes because Yaakov Avinu, our father Jacob on his deathbed, said that Manasseh and Ephraim shall be to me as my other sons. So they're treated the same as separate tribes. When we speak of 12 tribes, we're leaving out Levi. So it's kind of like, if you look at Manasseh and Ephraim as the sons of Joseph, Levi makes 12. But Levi does not get land. Levi serves God in Jerusalem at the Beit HaMikdash as Kohen Levi. And they are based, the ones not at the Beit HaMikdash, primarily at the Ari Miklat, the 6 cities of refuge. There are 3 west of the Jordan, 3 east of the Jordan. Also, Manasseh, alone among the tribes, has representation on both sides of the Jordan River. That way, in the old days, nowadays, a river does not divide a country, really. The Mississippi River does not really utterly distinguish the culture of the United States in, let's say, Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, but also Washington, Oregon, and California, from, let's say, states like, I don't know, Iowa, Arkansas, New York, New Jersey. It's not about the Mississippi River. Other factors account for the distinctions. But in those days, the river really divided a country. And that's why we still talk about the biggest synagogue west of the Mississippi. It's the fastest yada yada west of the Mississippi, because there was a point hundreds of years ago before modern transportation that people were stopped at the Mississippi. And it was a big, big thing for the Daniel Boones and the Davy Crockett's who were pushing westward. It was a big, big thing when America started to do its famous westward expansion. So the Jordan River divided culturally, and the Jews under Joshua decided, Moshe having promised Reuven Gad that they would be given portions of land east of the Jordan while they were still coming in from the Sinai desert. There was a concern they should not break off and become a separate people. So one tribe, Manasseh, was set up to be on both sides so that they would have a unique link across, and there would always be a connection east of the Jordan with the nation west of the Jordan. And we saw how that played out in Joshua, Yehoshua, when there was a misunderstanding and they were building a gigantic, gigantic monument that was like an altar. Now, in the middle of this territory is Ephraim. And we have learned a great, great focus on Ephraim. In the books of a little Yehoshua, a lot of Ephraim in Judges, in Shoftim, and more Ephraim as we begin in Sefer Shmuel Aleph. Shiloh, where the tabernacle, the portable temple, will be for the first 369 years, smack in Ephraim. And it borders Binyamin. Ephraim was a son of Joseph. Joseph was a child of Rachel. And her other child, Binyamin, she died in childbirth, giving birth to Binyamin. Binyamin is where you have the city of Beit El. And in its southern line, just inside Nip and Tuck, Yerushalayim Kodesh, holy city of Jerusalem, where the Beit HaMikdash ultimately was built. So Rachel has a very special portion. She had only 2 sons. Leah had 6, Reuven, Gad, Shimon, and Levi. Later, Issachar and Zebulun. And her maidservant, Zilpah, had Gad and Asher. And Rachel's maidservant, Bilhah, had Dan and Naphtali. But a special portion, Rachel had the children who were Shiloh and Yerushalayim. There's even a midrash that when Yaakov was fleeing for his life from the house of his parents, Yitzchak and Rivka, because Esav, his brother, wanted to kill him, and he stopped at the famous well where they could not roll the rock, the boulder, until all the men at once would roll it. And then he meets Rachel coming with the sheep of Lavan, and he meets her and he hugs her and he kisses her and he cries. There's a midrash. It's not in the text. In the text, he hugs her, kisses her, cries. In the midrash, they say he cried, and you could take it or leave it, because the other day, Sunday, we spoke about how to interpret midrashim in general, but they say he cried because he had a prophecy that the Beit HaMikdash would be destroyed, and it would be in her portion of land. It also is taught that as the Jews were exiled and they marched out of Eretz Israel to Babylonia, they passed the burial place of Rachel, and Rachel is crying for her children as she sees in Beit Lechem, as they are being forced marched out of Eretz Israel, out of Yehuda to Bavel, to Babylonia. It says she cries bitter tears from her grave for her children being driven from the land, for they shall no longer be there. And God says in the prophecy of Jeremiah, wipe back your tears. You don't have to cry, because your sons will return to their borders. They will come back. V'shavu banim ligvulam, and your sons shall return from the borders. In fact, let's take a very quick look at that pasuk as we then go into Shmuel Aleph. But it's a pasuk worth taking a moment. The prophecy of Yirmiyahu, of Jeremiah, telling Rachel, there is hope at the end of your days, and your children, your sons, will return. Komar Hashem. Od titi kramim, bahar e Shomron, natu not im vichilelu. Once again, God will make it. The Jews will plant vineyards in the hills of Samaria. You're now going to be in exile in Babylonia, but he will bring you back. He will bring you back to your land. And when he brings you back, Uva'u v'rinenu bimron Sion, they shall again rejoice, returning to Zion. Os tismach betula b'machol. That point, the young lady will sing and dance happily with her drums. Uvacharim uskenim yachtav. Young men and elderly men will celebrate together. V'hafachti avlam l'sason. I shall turn upside down their mourning and their sorrow to joy. V'nichamtim v'simachtim migonam. I shall make them so happy. Thus says the Lord. A cry is heard in Ramah, wailing, bitter weeping. Rachel weeping for her children, refusing to be comforted for her children who are gone. Thus says the Lord, restrain your voice from weeping, your eyes from shedding tears, for there is a reward for your labor, and your sons, they shall return from the land of the enemy, and there is hope for your future. Your children shall return to their land. Yesh tikvali acharitech, Num Hashem v'shavu banim ligvulam. And so we continue. Shavu banim, we're living in that prophetic time. It's an unbelievable thing to be living in a time where actually we witness the return of the Jews to their border. Shavu banim. There's even a song to that. I don't know if I've got it, if I find it really quickly. So we'll just find it for a moment. V'shavu banim ligvulam. will return to their borders. We live in those times. And the prophecy is that Jews will dance again in the streets of Jerusalem, and Jews will hear the song of dancing in the streets. And that's the seventh bracha. We were talking at the beginning about the Sheva brachas in the wedding, and the seventh bracha is that Jews will be back to Jerusalem, and Od Yishama ba'arei Yehuda u'v'chutzot Yerushalayim. Again, it will be heard in the streets of Yehuda and the streets of Yerushalayim. Kol sason v'kol simcha, kol sason v'kol simcha, kol chatan v'kol kala. The song and the voice of singing and dancing and grooms and brides. It's just an amazing thing for our grandparents and great-grandparents. Never could have dreamt really having Jewish sovereignty in the land of Israel. So let's go back in history as Jews were just in their first commonwealth, and there was Hannah crying. We've spent a few weeks on it. Now we're going to start moving at a much faster clip, having laid the foundation. First Samuel, by the way, the non-Jews refer to it as First Samuel, not Samuel 1 or 1 Samuel. In Hebrew, it's Shmuel Aleph. There are two books that are named Shmuel, Aleph and Bet, first and second, named for the prophet Shmuel. Shmuel wrote the book, Shmuel Aleph. Okay, so Eli, you remember, was trying to figure out about this lady who was crying like crazy, her lips quivering, a big scene, tears and weeping, thought she was drunk. She explained she's sober as could be, but very bitter because she has no children. And if she will only have her prayer answered and have a son, she will dedicate that first son to the service of God by actually letting Eli rear him at the Mishkan. And so Eli realizes he judged her unfairly. And the Gemara taught us, we studied the Gemara last 2 weeks in Brachot, page 31a, folio 31a. We have to be very careful not to judge other people, not to misjudge other people, not to misjudge them adversely. There's a great tendency some people have to just judge people unfairly. And it's a psychological thing. Are you the kind of person who by nature gives someone else the benefit of the doubt? Are you the kind of person who by nature has a chip on your shoulder? Obviously, those in our shul, that doesn't fly. People with chips on their shoulders are invited, seriously so, not to be members, but to go to a different shul. We tell them the shul to join. And we won't have in our shul people who are by nature negative. But there are people who are negative. We all have met them in the course of a lifetime. And then there's a third kind of person who's neither here nor there. I don't give people benefit of doubt. I don't judge them negative. I don't care. I don't look into other people's lives. I've got my own life, and my nose does not belong where it does not belong. So that is acceptable too. But if you are a person who has curiosity and you do kind of wonder about others, we should look at people, primarily give them benefit of the doubt. A lot of people, I'm a rabbi, and therefore I am privy to a lot of confidential things that other people don't know about certain people. And it has been a lifetime of amazingness, if there was such a word, learning about people behind the curtain, things others don't know going on in their lives. And what motivates and animates certain people in certain ways. And when you learn that about people, when you hear their private stories, you gain a completely different understanding of what motivates some people that they're really very good. They're very good, but they have a reason. A person, let's say, who does not just go around giving a lot of charity, it seems, even though incredibly wealthy. And then you begin to learn privately how the whole world is at that person's door asking for money. And that yes, the person could give, but it never stops. Relatives 3, 4 generations away, 6, 10 times removed, not even like Kevin, what's his name, with the 6 degrees of separation from Kevin Bacon. People, 10 separations, everybody trying to get money out of the person. And then you learn other things in a personal life. There are people who have handicaps. And if you don't know about their handicap and how that handicap plays out, you might hear this person has illness X, Y, or Z. Okay, I feel sorry for you. And we all are very attuned to cancer when we hear someone's got cancer. God forbid, God forbid, God forbid. But there are a lot of other things we don't think about. And then you meet the person privately, hear their story, and you find out that that particular illness does not sound like a lot, but here's how it throws the whole household into chaos. And don't we see it in school? When someone, let's say, has a reading challenge, dyslexia, you don't catch dyslexia. It's not like if a member in the house has dyslexia, you better wear a mask and get an injection. It's not a sin. A lot of people have it. I know of quite a few. And the challenges, so sometimes kids in school, let's say the teacher calls on someone to read from a book. And the kid has trouble reading from the book because the kid has dyslexia. And then some of the kids make fun. Oh, he's stupid. She's stupid. She can't read. She's so stupid. No, she might be a genius, might be smarter than anyone else in the class, just has a challenge in the way those letters appear. And so one simply has to overcome that. Einstein had serious learning disabilities. So he was only able to kind of like read E-M-C, E equals MC. And then he threw a number 2 there. Well, boy, that's stupid. He thinks 3 letters in a number is one of his relatives. Well, his theory of relativity changed the world. Even now, most of us can't figure out what the hell it was. And sure, Woody Allen was actually in film school at NYU. And one day he decided, I'm attending classes here at NYU Film School. These people are crazy. I'm not learning anything here. They don't know the first thing about making movies. So he dropped out of school. And the professor said, if you don't learn how to make a movie, you're not going to make movies. So nobody knows the name of that professor. He or she is forgotten from history. And Woody Allen has made like 7,000 movies. So that's how it goes. That's how it goes. I don't remember whether it's Bill Gates or Zuckerberg. Well, Zuckerberg stuck it out in school because we saw the movie The Network. But either Gates, a bunch of these people dropped out of school, became very successful. I should have probably. I would have been more successful. But this way I learned how to use Zoom. Okay, so what we learned in the text is that we learned in the Gemara, Eli had to apologize to Hannah and had to end by giving her a bracha. And this is what the Gemara teaches. Anyone who ever misreads and misjudges another person negatively needs to apologize and send them off with a bracha. We concluded chapter 1. She returns a little bit later, a few years later. First of all, Vayihilit Kufot Hayamim, after a few cycles of days, years, she does give birth, has a baby whom she names Shmuel. Shema, Shema Yisrael, Shem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Shema means to hear. El is God. That's why we say Kael. When we refer to God, Elohim, we say Elokim. The only reason I just said it with the hey, with the H, is because I'm teaching Torah. Shmuel, God heard. God heard my prayers. I begged a child. That's why she named him Samuel. And she brought, at Rosh Hashanah, when they came up to Shiloh, to their annual Rosh Hashanah in Shiloh. She left off the child. For a few years, she did not go up. She was breastfeeding, and it just was not doable. Keep in mind, they did not have comfortable cars and chauffeur-driven limousines, Teslas, I don't know. She'd have to go horse and buggy. That's why people would die on long trips. Denise and I, the other day, we were watching the movie about the Okies and the Dust Bowl, The Grapes of Wrath, based on the famous John Steinbeck book. Wonderful movie starring Henry Fonda. And members of the Jode family die on the trip across from Oklahoma to California. Very hard to travel in the old days. Not for a day or two, but for weeks. You had to get food. So Chana lo alata. Chana did not go up to Shiloh. She instead was going to stay. Go ahead, Elkanah, you go with Penina and the kids, and I'll wait until the baby is weaned, is able to eat foods other than mother's milk. And so Elkanah said, you just stay here, do what's right, take care of the house. We have an Instacart delivery coming in 2 days. Pick it up. Not. You stay here until you're able to wean the baby. And she stayed behind for a few years until the baby was able to eat without mother's milk. And then she went up for Rosh Hashanah to the Mishkan with Elkanah, her husband, and with Penina, her difficult co-wife. As you know, they had polygamy in those days. And so she went and brought Shmuel. And when she got there, she saw Eli and told Eli, El Hanar Hazeh, Hit Palalti. This is that boy I was praying for, and God answered my prayers, and I have promised I would devote him, his life to God. Kol hayamim asher haya hu sha'ol Hashem. He will be on loan to God all the days of his life. Chapter 2. Vatitpalel Chana v'tomar alatz libi b'Hashem Ramah karni b'Hashem. She actually sings a song. We won't do it much. We're not going to go through much of it. We're learning primarily for text and for depth of text, but also there is no one holy like God. Ein kadosh kashem. Ein sur kelokenu. Ein kelokenu. You know that prayer song. Ein kelokenu. Ein kadonenu. Ein kemalkenu. Ein kamoshienu. Mi chelokenu. Mi chadonenu. Mi chemalkenu. Mi chamoshienu. Ein sur kelokenu. There is no rock like our God. And sur, you know that word from the Hanukkah song. Ma'usur Yeshuati Lichana'eh L'Shabeach. God is our rock. So there is no rock like our God. And she speaks and she sings of God, Hashem Emitim Chayeh, Morit Sha'ol Vaya'al. God gives death, God gives life. Hashem Morishu Ma'ashir. God makes some people poor, and he takes poor people and makes them rich. Mashpil af meromeim. The haughty can be brought down rapidly. God brings down the arrogant, and he raises up the humble. She does not use words here, arrogant and humble, so she could be speaking likewise. He raises up the arrogant. There are people who he raises up for his reasons, and then they are tested. And he casts down others, and they are tested. And sometimes, eventually, he takes down the haughty, and he raises up those who are humble and who are low. Mekim me afar dol, me ashpot yarim evyon. You may recognize that from Hallel prayer that we recite on Rosh Chodesh and on the major holidays, when korbanot, when the sacrifices would be offered. He raises up from the dust the poverty-stricken, from garbages. Ashpa is a garbage. From the dunghill, from garbages, he raises up those who are desperately poor, lahoshiv im nedivim, so that they can be raised up and sit alongside princes. It's that kind of world. I've experienced it. And I haven't been in the garbage dumps, but I, in my lifetime, have had a rabbi who loves being a rabbi and has made a career of being a rabbi and is passionate of being a rabbi, does not suddenly go to law school and practice law for 10 years plus. It may be that I did very well in law school and I loved becoming a law professor later. I love teaching, just as I love teaching Torah. But if I had to change careers, there's a story, there's plenty of backstories to that one, and none of them are smiles. Those are some of the tough times I've been through. And I made it through. And I've never in my life presented myself as, hey, look at me. Look what I accomplished. I thank God. It's all God. The fact that I made it back into the Rabbanut, that I again was able to see my way clear financially and professionally to become a Rav again, it's a miracle. So I've experienced it firsthand, and I know that everyone here, in one way or another, it doesn't necessarily have to be a profession or a career, but we all have those moments. It could be it could be our children, grandchildren, it could be finances, it could be profession, it could be life, it could be social. We have those moments, and God raises up, and it's sort of, wow. So she's singing and she's thanking God. Hashem yichatu merivav alav b'shamayim yar'im. The foes of God shall be shattered. He will thunder against them in the heavens. Of Searts. V'yiten oz l'malko v'yarim karen meshicho. He will give power to his king. And so she sings her song, and then Elkanah goes home. With the family, V'hanar hayam esharedet Hashem epnei Eli the Kohen. Elkanah and the wives and everybody come home, and they leave Shmuel behind with Elkanah. And Elkanah has two sons with whom he runs the facility and the operation, the administration of the Mishkan. However, unfortunately, his two sons, Chofni and Pinchas, did not bring pride. Unfortunately, they seem to have been, if not outright evil, they seem to have been possibly evil and definitely not good. B'nai Eli, B'nai Belial, lo yadu et Hashem. Despite holding high office as the sons of the high Kohen, they actually manifested a lack of fear or love of God, and they instead took advantage of their positions. It kind of was a little bit like some of the people we've encountered publicly in the world, in the United States, someone who maybe is a relative of the president and takes advantage. Some do, some don't. All the children of the Kennedys, just using the modern era of the last 50, 60 years, all the children of Kennedys seem to have been, whatever your politics, public-spirited public servants, the whole bunch of them. Even the idiots who tried to fly their private aircraft in the middle of the night without being licensed to fly at night, or who played football downslope and got themselves killed. But to the degree they devoted their lives, everything we know about the children of the Kennedys is that they were reared to live public spirited lives. The Nixon kids, Trish Nixon married David Eisenhower, public spirited. The two daughters of Gerald Ford, they seem to have come out fine, like the children of Johnson. And then Chelsea Clinton, again, no matter what your politics may be, On one side, Chelsea Clinton. On the other side, Ivanka Trump. Wonderful, public-spirited people. So they seem. And then on the other hand, you have someone like a Hunter Biden, who's clearly a bum and takes advantage of his father's position. So we watch these things. We don't have to go into detail on Hunter Biden. It's not what our class will be about. But as we saw, does not matter Democrat, Republican. It's human nature. Some people are born into public service and they continue in their families to have the opportunity, and they take advantage in the best way of continuing public service. And some people abuse it. Likewise, B'nai Eli, B'nai Belial, the two sons of Eli, unfortunately, abused their station. Umishpat hakohanim ta'am, and they took advantage. When people would come and offer sacrifices, that is, bring a cow that the Kohen slaughters, some of it is set on fire on the altar, offered to God. Other of the meat is given to the Kohen according to Torah law. That's where the Kohanim get their food, in part, primarily from sacrifices, because they, right? If you're from Levi, you don't get land. So you don't have your own farm pretty much to grow your crop or to graze cattle and sheep. So what you do, the Torah says that they will get food. People will bring meat sacrifices. They get some of that meat. People bring flour and oil as part of other sacrifices from which they can make everything from pancakes to donuts. And what they would do is they would violate Torah law by requiring people to give them more meat, a higher percentage of the meat than the Torah apportioned to them. Likewise, so it says whatever the fork brought up, the priest, which means Kohen, would take away on it. This was the practice at Shiloh. They took more than they were entitled to. And so what would happen is say, hand over some meat. He won't accept boiled meat. The particular meat that was given was basar mavushal, boiled meat, cooked meat. Imagine in your mind the difference between a cooked beef versus a grilled beef. So they wanted the grill, or smoked or whatever. And so they gave a bad impression. It's the way a lot of Americans look at televangelists. I'm a rabbi. I get paid by the shul. I have to make a living. Can't just live on love. Thank God I make a living. I don't make a lot from the shul, and that's okay because I get so much spiritual joy from the shul, and I prefer to have other sources of income as well. So I derive income from being a lawyer, from being a law professor, from being a published writer. Okay. A lot of us, but it does cost money to run a shul, right? If you're gonna daven somewhere, you got to pay for the building, whether you own a shul, whether you rent a facility. You have to pay Zoom. Zoom has a free angle, but if you want to have regular Zoom classes and have people sometimes in large numbers attending, and if you want recordings to be recorded to the cloud, you have to pay. If you want to have the name Young Israel, we have to pay annual dues to the National Council of Young Israel. It's not like you can just buy the name. You have to meet their standards. But even if you do, you have to pay dues. Orthodox Union, you have to pay dues. Insurance, not to mention what we have to pay just to buy Siddur. So you need money. But televangelists who have to have money to pay for their operations and buy their television time, but they got a bad rep. Because amid all the spirituality and talking about their religion, they're always hitting you for money. It's a very fine line, because if they don't hit you for money, they won't be able to do the other stuff. And if they have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, watching, isn't that when they should hit for money? Isn't that what shuls do and what Reform and conservative temples do? They hit you for money at Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur time. Why don't they do it in March? Because the Jews don't come in March. The Jews march in September, and they September in March. So they know that the people are going to show up at Rosh Hashanah Kippur, So that's when they go for the money. So it's a very, very fine line. I always felt terribly uncomfortable making a Yom Kippur appeal, seeing faces. I'm going back 30, 40 years to my first shuls in Jersey City, seeing people that only once in a year, they're going to show up in shul, Kol Nidre night, and I prepared a sermon, a Devar Torah, to hopefully inspire at least someone in the room, that for your once a year showing in shul, this year perhaps you'll be inspired to come more than once. And now I've got to merge into it and appeal for cash, which is, it feels like the opposite. Now, for some people who are more cynical, they come in expecting to be hit for cash. So they're not surprised, they're not offended, and they're also not moved spiritually. They feel that they have to pay their dues by showing up once a year and write a check after Yom Tov. It's very hard to be spiritual. It seems to clash. Over the course of a career, I've been blessed to meet people, by the way, who see the rabbi asking for money as an opportunity. Thank you for giving me the opportunity, since I have some money available for charity, to have a worthy reason and a worthy purpose in giving some charity. It adds to my life of meaning that I'm able to support this institution. Once I gained that insight from certain donors, I was more easily able to ask for money. But as you know, in our shul, we make every effort to, we no longer do that. We pretty much just have an annual appeal before Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Now that we have the internet and it's easy to make a donation, logistically, we have people like Marilee, who used to bring to my attention how our old platform was just impossible very often, and you have to try 6 times, and it didn't. We now have the modern way to donate. It's a beautiful platform, does it easily, but it allows me not to merge my Yom Kippur message or any Shabbat message necessarily asking for money. But this was out of control with the sons of Eli, Chofni and Pinchas, who is a different Pinchas from the more famous Pinchas of the Torah, the grandson of the first Kohen Gadol, Aaron. So you had Aharon, the brother of Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher. Aharon was the first Kohen, the Kohen Gadol, the great Kohen. He had 4 sons, Nadav, Avihu, Elazar, Tamar. Nadav and Avihu tragically died at the Mishkan in the desert when they brought in Eish Zorah. We're not sure exactly what it means, but a forbidden flame. It may be that they were under inebriation at the time. We've learned that in the past. And that left 2 sons, Elazar and the older, and Itamar. So Elazar followed Aharon, and his son was Pinchas. And that's the very, very famous Pinchas the Kohen. This is another Pinchas, brother of Chofni. And so they really did bad stuff. They took advantage of their place, and their father a little bit knew what they were doing. And it's like, go ahead, and if you have a bad kid, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? There's what you do behind the scenes. There's what you do in public. Do you attack your kid in public? Do you fire him from being assistant Kohen? A challenge for Eli, which, by the way, that's where the English name Eli comes from. Eli is coming. So Uberach Eli Elkanah v'yerishto. Eli gave a blessing to Elkanah and to his wife Chana. May you be blessed. Yasem Hashem l'chazera min ha'isha azot. May you have more children, and may God take care of you. Ki kavah kadosh Shem Chana v'ata v'telet shalosh banim u'shtei banot. She ended up with 3 boys, 2 sons, 3 boys, 2 daughters, 5 kids. By Agdal Hanar Shmuel Hashem, and Shmuel grew up under the auspices of Eli at the Mishkan in service to God. But Eli Zaken Ma'od. By now, Eli was getting very elderly, and he got word of what his sons were up to. and it broke his heart. And he spoke to them. Vayomer lehem lama tasun kadvar ma'ela, asher anochi shomet devrechem ra'im met kol ha'amela. Why do you do this? I'm hearing about it from all the Jews. Everyone comes up here and they tell me about the two of you. What is wrong with you? Al Banai, you can't do this. Kilo tova shmua, asher anochi shomer ma'avirim im amashem. You can't do these things I hear you doing. This is terrible. If a man sins against a man, God may pardon him. But if a man offends God, I mean, what are you going to do to gain pardon? God actually hardened their hearts in a variation on what happened with Paro in Egypt. They, instead of repenting, they had gone so far afield and had caused so much disrespect to religion. They were the religious leaders. And to God, that God already was settled, they have to be punished. And so they did not hearken to their father's efforts of remonstrations, pleas, and they continued in their evil ways. Meanwhile, Eli at least had a good boy growing up under his same auspices. Vanar Shmuel Aleph v'gadel ma'od v'tov gamim Hashem v'gamim anashim. He was growing older and becoming a person of greatness, both in the eyes of God and among the Jews coming to Shiloh. Vayavo ish Elokim et Eli v'yomer elav komar Hashem. A man of God came to Eli and said, I want you to know that God is chosen. There was your family and these two boys, and look how they've come out. And you have given your sons a certain amount of honor. You have honored your sons more than I, more than me. Feeding on the first portions. Therefore, says God, I intend for you and your father's house. I intended it to be forever, but now instead, I will not make it forever. The family household, the greatness that would have been your sons, essentially is going to pass on through Samuel, not genetically, not familiarly. Shmuel was not a Kohen, but it will pass on. He's a descendant, actually, Moshe and Aaron's. L'cheinu Hashem Elokei Yisrael Amor Marti Beitcha uVeit Avicha Yitalchu Lefonai Arolam Yatanu Hashem Chalila Li Ki Mechavdai Chaberu Vosai Yekalu. Therefore, the day is coming. I will break your power, that of your father's house. There shall be no elder in the house. And what can I tell you? V'zelcha ha'ot asher yavo el shtei banecha el Chofni uPinchas biyom echad yamutu shneim. And you will know that assuredly the spiritual leadership will move from your household and family to others, because on the same day both Chofni and Pinchas will die. You know, I'm lahavdil. It's got nothing to do with Jews. It's a whole different thing. But I'm just thinking of like Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia. It was created by Jerry Falwell, the pastor of Lynchburg. At one point, practically the entire city of Lynchburg were members of his church. Can you imagine? You imagine having a shul. Every Jew in Orange County is a member of your shul. There's no other Reform, Conservative, or Orthodox. It's not about denomination. It's just that every Jew, 100,000 Jews, Orange County, every one a member of your shul. That's what Jerry Falwell created in Lynchburg, Virginia. It's not the biggest city in Virginia. They have cities like Richmond, other famous cities. Civil War was fought up and down Virginia. Can you imagine? And he created Liberty University. And it handed down, he passed away. By the way, he was a great friend of Israel. whatever your politics, he was Republican, conservative. We don't get into politics in our classes. He was a great friend of Israel. I met him once or twice, actually, in person, of course. I met him. Great friend of Israel. Met him in the 1980s. He passed away, and the legacy and everything was handed to his son, Jerry Falwell Jr. Became president of the university, took over his father's nationally televised weekly Sunday TV program. And then about a year or two ago, he, Falwell Jr. and his wife were caught up in a scandal so terrible and disgusting. The wife had an affair going on with the quintessential affair with the gardener, or the pool guy, one of those, the swimming pool guy with the big muscles and the smile. She ended up having an affair, and he was doing something where he posed with a woman on his yacht. He had his zipper open, and even though apparently he did not necessarily do stuff that his wife did, what pastor who heads a church walks around when half drunk with the zipper open? Okay, so they took it all away from him. His board of directors took away the university. He lost everything. They did not close down the university. They did not close down the church. But it's all been taken away from the Falwell family to other people. That's what happened here with Eli. It was all going to be his kids. It was going to be a dynasty, not a king monarchy, but a dynasty. Instead, his two sons will die on the same day. The Hakimoti Eli the Kohen Gadol kasher bilvavi uvinafshi asa uvaniti lo bait neman v'hitalech lifnei Mashiach kol hayamim. I shall pick a different Kohen to minister to me, and instead, kol hanotah beveitcha yavo lishtachavot lo. Those who still remain alive, Pinchas and Chafni are finished, and those who remain alive, they will have to bow down to my new Kohen. And with that, we conclude chapter 2. Given the time, we're perfectly on schedule. Next week, God willing, chapters 3, 4, and 5. Just a sneak preview. Vanar Shmuel Mishrated Hashem Lifnei Eli. Quietly, methodically, spiritually, meanwhile, Shmuel is growing up to serve God. Udavar Hashem haya yakar b'yamim hahen en chazon nifratz. And to be serving God in that central capacity at Shiloh was unique because it was not a time of the prophets. Remember, we're just after the judges, the Shoftim. It's not yet the prophets like, Shmuel, who will be the first of the main prophets, and there'll be like prophets like Natan, Nathan, and eventually there'll be prophets like Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Isaiah. But this is a time where Shmuel is growing to fill an